Hey, recap time. So, here's everything you missed on the oh, hang on, let me let me start over real quick, because I'll need to do this for the YouTube channel. I cut everything up to this point for the YouTube channel. So, hello everybody, welcome to Silmarillion Sunday, and hello to everyone on YouTube that is still watching. Thank you so much. This is part 10, and we are now in the recap portion. The recaps are going to get a little bit longer, so feel free to skip ahead a few minutes if you have been binging these. I know some people have in the chat over on Twitch, so thank you so much. So we begin the Silmarillion with the creation story. Tolkien's god Eru creates the Ainur, and the Ainur are beings of his thought. I usually refer to them as lesser gods. And so the Ainur sing themes of music that please Eru. But there is one Ainur named Melkor who doesn't play in harmony with the rest of the Ainur and corrupts a couple of the other Ainur, and Eru is like, no, don't do that. From the beginning, you can kind of tell Melkor's going to be a problem. After a few times when the Ainur create these themes of music, they create what is known as Ea, the world that is. And so the Ainur create Ea, and some of the Ainur go down to Ea, the physical world, and rule it. Well, not rule it, but exist in it for a time. These Ainur are known as the Valar. And the Valar are basically creating the world, and of course Melkor goes down with them and tries to be the ruler of it, of all the plants and animals and beasts, and the Valar are like, no, stop, but he doesn't stop. Melkor does not stop. Skip ahead a couple thousand years, I think, ish, and the elves come into existence, and the Valar are like, oh shoot, the elves are here, we need to make the world safe from Melkor. So they throw Melkor in jail, metaphorical jail, like another dimension-ish. So thousands of years pass, and the elves are hanging out in Valinor, and they're all having a great time. Some of the elves stay in the Undying Lands, but for the most part, all the elves are out in Valinor having a great time, and the sentence of Melkor ends. And so he's out of jail and is like, oh, I hate those elves. They're the reason I got thrown in jail. And so he hates the elves and starts corrupting them, poisoning their minds, thinking, hey, maybe the Valar aren't as great as they say they are. Maybe they're keeping you here against your will. One of the elves that Melkor talks to is called Feanor. And Feanor is a really powerful elf. And he starts kind of getting these ideas like, I don't think this guy's right, but I don't know. In the meantime, Feanor makes these jewels called the Silmarils. The Silmarils are basically gems that contain the light of the world, right? Metaphorically and literally speaking. They are made from the light of, or inspired by, the light of two trees that are in Valinor. Two giant trees that create light, named Laurelin and Telperion. And Melkor eventually destroys the trees, kills Feanor's father, Finwë, and runs to Middle-earth with the Silmarils in hand and steals them. So Feanor is like, okay, let's go get him, and changes Melkor's name to Morgoth, which I believe means Cursed One or Dark One or something. Feel free to correct me in chat. So, the elves, led by Feanor, which are called the Noldor, make their way to the north of the Undying Lands because they realize they need boats to get to the to Middle-earth, and the Noldor say, hey, elves. The elves that have the boats are called the Teleri, and the Teleri are like, hey, what's going on? And the Noldor, Feanor, basically say, hey, we need your boats. We need to get to Middle-earth. We're going to go fight Morgoth. Come with us. And the Teleri are like, no, that sounds like a really bad idea. Melkor's like really powerful. We're not going to do that. Swords are drawn, and elves die. It is called the kinslaying. And the kinslaying is something that is going to come up a lot as a reference. So the kinslaying is basically this really horrible battle between the Noldor and the Teleri, and the Noldor eventually win, steal the boats, and make their way to the Undying Lands. And meanwhile, in Middle-earth, because there's kind of a pause there, meanwhile in Middle-earth, there is an elf. Remember how I mentioned there's a couple of elves that stay in Middle-earth and don't ever go to the Undying Lands? One of those elves' names is Thingol, and Thingol falls in love with a, I want to call them demigods. They're called Maya, but you can think of them as demigods. And in creating, and in the process, the demigod, Melian, and Thingol fall in love and start their own realm called Doriath, and have this, like, all of this enchanted magic, and it's a safe area for elves, and it's protected, because as soon as Melkor comes over, things start going very poorly. And it's around this time that things start going very poorly that the dwarves come into existence. The dwarves were created by another lesser god named Aule. And so the elves and the dwarves, right, they're friends now. And so they start fighting against Melkor, and they're like, shoot, what are we going to do? We're in trouble. Well, all of a sudden, all of these elves come over from the Undying Lands, Feanor and all of his people, and they're like, we're here. Let's go kick Morgoth's butt. And things don't go so well from there. And this is a bit of a spoiler for anyone that is not caught up yet, or if you're just joining, so full disclosure, this will be a pretty big spoiler. Feanor, the character who we have followed for almost 100-ish pages, well, probably close to 75 pages, who seems like one of the main characters, dies in one of the very first battles against Morgoth. To give you an idea, we have read 110 pages, right, of that, and we still have this much to go. And one of our main characters is gone, right? Just absolute. They get over there, they fight, and Feanor just gone. Gets surrounded by a bunch of Balrogs. Most of his like strongest warriors totally gone. So the Noldor, the elves that came over from the Undying Lands, are leaderless, in a way, because there's like a couple of people that could vie for power, and so long story short, the elves of the Noldor and the elves of the Middle-earth kind of sort of join together and be like, cool, we're friends now. And then a bunch of other elves come over from the Undying Lands who didn't get on the boats because Feanor burned the boats. Everyone that was on the boat the first time were the only elves that came there. The elves then burn the ships, or Feanor then burns the ships, and all of the other elves that are still in the Undying Lands see it happen, and they're like, oh, that's not great. Luckily, there's a giant ice tundra in the north of the Undying Lands that connects Middle-earth and the Undying Lands together, called the Helcarax, and a bunch of elves make it over. And so the elf, Fingolfin, is one of the elves that is now like the leader of the elves now that Feanor is gone. Feanor has 7 sons, and one of the sons was captured in the battle, and one he was rescued by, oh shoot, you know what? It wasn't, was it Fingolfin? I can't keep track of the names, hang on. But Fingolfin withdrew. Fingon, sorry, Fingolfin's son. Fingon is like, okay, cool, I'm gonna go rescue my friend, and does. And in the process, the Feanorian line, they're like, okay, the sons of Feanor, we don't have any claim to the throne anymore. So Fingolfin, Fingon, you're the rulers now. It's cool. We're good. Everyone's fine. Debt's paid. We're good. They weren't. Ish. I'll explain. Anyway, we will pick up where we left off. Oh yeah, men come into existence. Sorry, totally forgot to mention chapter 12, because chapter 12 is only 2.5 pages. So at somewhere in all of these like battles and like relations between the elves and the dwarves, humans come into existence, and some of them are hanging out with the elves, and most of them are kind of scared of the elves and kind of hang out in the east and south of Middle-earth. Anyway, yeah. I hope that helps. I know these recaps are getting a little bit longer, so apologies to those on YouTube. Now would be the time to start the actual reading proper of Chapter 13 of the Silmarillion, of the Return of the Noldor. Before we start, though, I do want to give a quick shout-out. Hello to everyone on TikTok. Excuse me. Hi to everyone on TikTok. I am live on Twitch right now. Feel free to give me a follow, just like Big Nate the Great 009 did just now. Thank you so much, Nate. Appreciate it. Also, Kayla Bear, thank you for the follow. Dalagor, thank you for the follow. And Davroos0132 and Leludova and Rolfie. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right. Welcome, everyone. Oh, my phone buzzed. My mother called me in the middle of a live stream 2 days ago, or right before I was about to go live. It was wonderful. All right. Ryan Hooper, thank you for the follow. All right. All right. Let's begin in the middle of Chapter 13 of The Return of the Noldor. If you are following along using this version of the book, I am on page 109. I lied. It's page 111. Oops. Oh, I might even... Hang on, I might need to do this again. Oh, no. As messengers spoke with the king, telling him the deeds of the Noldor in the north. Therefore, even as Maedroth foretold... Okay, I found it. Sorry. I am on page 111 of this copy. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. All right, let's begin with the middle of Chapter 13 of The Return of the Noldor. Now King Thingol welcomed not with a full heart the coming of so many princes in might out of the west, eager for new realms. And he would not open his kingdom, nor remove the girdle of enchantment. For wise with wisdom of Melian, he trusted not the restraint of Morgoth would endure. So you'll remember, King Thingol is the king that stayed in Middle-earth and married Melian, the Maya, one of those demigods. And they have their own sort of area to rule called Doriath. And Thingol's a little bit naturally suspicious of all of these people that are just like, you all probably want your own realms. I'm gonna stick to my own. And that's a theme that happens a lot. Alone of all the princes of the Noldor, those of Finarfin's house were suffered to pass within the confines of Doriath, for they could claim close kinship to King Thingol himself, since their mother was Eärwen of Alqualonde, Alway's daughter. You don't really need to remember that part all that much. Angrod, son of Finarfin, was the first of the exiles to come to Menegroth. Menegroth is also another name for Thingol's sort of area, as messenger of his brother Finrod, and he spoke long with the king, telling him of the deeds of the Noldor in the north, and of their numbers, and of the ordering of their forces. But being true and wise-hearted, and thinking all grief now forgiven, he spoke no word concerning the kinslaying, nor of the manner of the exile of the Noldor, and the oath of Feanor. So this messenger doesn't mention the fact that most of the Teleri were wiped out, and they were killed by the Noldor, because all is forgiven, right? Right? No. Not yet, anyway. King Thingol hearkened to the words of Angrod, and ere he went, he said to him, Thus shall you speak for me to those that sent you. In Hithlum, the Noldor have leave to dwell, and in the highlands of Dorthonion, and in the lands east of Doriath, that are empty and wild. But elsewhere there are many of my people, and I would not have them restrained of their freedom, still less ousted from their homes. Beware, therefore, how you princes of the west bear yourselves, for I am the Lord of Beleriand, and all who seek to dwell there shall hear my words. Into Doriath none shall come to abide, but only such as I call my guests, or who seek me in great need. Now the lords of the Noldor had held council in Mithrim, and thither came Angrod. Thither is another word for there, or there goes, bearing the message of King Thingol. Cold seemed its welcome to the Noldor, and the sons of Feanor were angered at the words. Not going to be the last time that happens. But Maedhros laughed, saying, "A king is he that can hold his own, or else his title is vain. Thingol does but grant us lands where his power does not run. Indeed, Doriath alone would be his realm this day, but for the coming of the Noldor. Therefore in Doriath let him reign, and be glad that he has the sons of Finwë for his neighbors, and not the orcs of Morgoth, as we found. Elsewhere it shall go as seems good to us." But Caranthir, who loved not the sons of Finarfin, Caranthir is another one of the sons of Finwë. But Caranthir, who loved not the sons of Finarfin, and was harshest to the brothers, and most quick to anger, cried aloud, "Yea, more. Let not the sons of Finarfin run hither and thither in their tales with their tales of this dark elf in his caves. Who made them our spokesmen to deal with him? And though they be this is a hard one. And though they be come indeed to Beleriand, let them not so swiftly forget that their father is the lord of the Noldor, though their mother be of other kin." Then Angrod was wrathful, and went forth from the council. Maedhros indeed rebuked Caranthir, but the greater part of the Noldor of both followings, hearing his words, were troubled in heart, feeling the fell spirits of the sons of Feanor that it seemed would ever be like to burst forth in rash words or violence. Again, rash words and violence, kind of a common theme in the sons of Feanor. But Maedhros restrained his brothers, and they departed from the council. And soon afterward they left Mithrim, and went eastward beyond Aros, to the wide lands about the hills of Himring. That region was named thereafter the March of Maedhros, for northward there was little defense of hill or river against the assault from Angband. Angband is where Morgoth keeps his his realm, basically, of evil. It's like Mordor, but in the north. There, Maedhros and his brother kept watch, gathering all such peoples as would come to them. And they had few dealings with other kinsfolk westward, save at need. It is said, indeed, that Maedhros himself devised this plan to lessen the chances of strife, and because he was very willing that the chief peril of assault should fall upon himself, and he remained for his part in friendship with the house of Fingolfin and Finarfin, and would come upon them at times for common counsel. Yet he also was bound by the oath, though it slept now for a time. I'll take a brief pause there. It's been about 2 pages. Feel free to ask any questions in the comments section of Twitch. Everyone on TikTok, if you're still around, feel free to join us over on Twitch, where I'm taking questions. For anyone that seems to feel like the elves are a little bit hot-headed, and that Maedhros is going to be kind of a calming factor, maybe, you're on the right path. All right, let's take some questions in the chat. Lord Gregor lives. You believe their daughter is someone we know. So I believe you are referring to Thingol and Melian. Their daughter is someone that we haven't met yet. That is Luthien, and Luthien's going to come up a little later. I think we've got 6 or 7 more chapters until we get to the Tale of Beren and Luthien. So basically, as a quick recap, what has just happened is the Noldor have come over. Maedhros has relinquished his claim to the crown of the ruling the Noldor. But, the Noldor are kind of spreading out. In the meantime, Thingol, who has already been here, is like, this is my land. Y'all are free to be wherever else you want, but don't come here. It's the equivalent of get off my lawn from Gran Torino. So question, Big Nate has a question. So at this time, is Angband the Mordor of this time? And has Sauron or Morgoth claimed that place yet? So Mordor, as we know it in the Third Age, doesn't exist that way yet. Angband is the sort of Mordor equivalency, if you want to say it like that. That's a fairly good way to put it. And there is a... actually, you know what? There might be a map in here. I'll see if I can find it. If it doesn't exist, that's okay. But there is a map here. I don't know if it has Angband in it, because it's very much farther to the north. That's Dorthonion. That's Anfauglith. That's Hithlum. Okay, so I'll give you kind of a decent sense of this. So that's Hithlum. That's where the Noldor are hanging out. This is Doriath. This is where Thingol and Melian are. That's the guy who said, "Get off my lawn." And so Angband is like up here by where my finger is, because this is Anfauglith. So further up is Angband. There's a fairly decent... oh, and actually something else to point out. This right here is the March of Maethros. We just read about that. So the elves are also here as well. And so the Noldor are basically acting as a buffer between Morgoth and his forces and the rest of Middle-earth at this point. Also got a couple of people to thank. Tin Fizzy, thank you for the Prime sub. Also, to those new followers, welcome. If you do have Amazon Prime does give you a free subscription to one Twitch channel once a month. If you feel so inclined, you can use that here. It helps support the stream a lot, so thank you. Bayani, thank you for the follow. Lena EP, thank you for the follow. And Gallifrey Storm, thank you for the follow. Also, Ikari Rush, thank you. Also, Gallifrey and Storm, great screen name. Thank you. Big Doctor Who fan. All right. So Darth asked a question. Morgoth and Sauron live in Angband now. Yes, it is north of Middle-earth. How did the humans come to Middle-earth? So the humans came a little bit later than the elves. The humans just sort of were brought into consciousness by Eru, the god in Tolkien's universe, thousands of years after the elves had already established themselves. Yeah, that's basically it. Also, if anyone is interested, if you're a newcomer, this is my mug that says Yeet Isildur. The link to that is in my bio. I have shirts and stickers and hoodies that say Yeet Isildur on them. They are quite wonderful. For those that are a little bit older, yeet means to forcefully throw, and so the joke is that Elrond should have forcefully thrown Isildur into the lava. Then none of this would have happened. All right, I'm going to pick up there. Love this bookmark. All right. Caranthir, then Angrod was wrathful, and now the people... Okay, here we go. Now the people of Caranthir dwelt furthest east beyond the upper waters of Gelion, about Lake Helivorn, under Mount Rainier, and to the southward, and they climbed the heights of Ered Luin, looking eastward in wonder. For wild and wide it seemed to them were the lands of Middle-earth. And thus it was Caranthir's people and thus it was that Caranthir's people came upon the dwarves, who, after the onslaught of Morgoth and the coming of the Noldor, had ceased their traffic into Beleriand. But though either people loved skill and were eager to learn, no great love was there between them. For the dwarves were secret and quick to resentment, and Caranthir was haughty, and scarce concealed his scorn for the unloveliness of the Naugrim. Naugrim is another word for dwarf. I believe that's what they call themselves. Or maybe I believe the dwarves call themselves Naugrim. And his people followed their lord. Nevertheless, since both people feared and hated Morgoth, they made alliance, and had of it great profit. For the Naugrim learned many secrets of craft in those days, so that the smiths and masons of Nogrod and Belagost became renowned among their kin. And when the dwarves began to again journey into Beleriand, all the traffic of the dwarf mines passed first through the hands of Caranthir, and thus great riches came to him. Tin Fizzy makes a great comment. Morgoth, really bringing people together. You know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. You're not wrong. You are not wrong. When 20 years of the sun had passed, Fingolfin, king of the Noldor, made a great feast. And it was held in the spring near the pools of Ivrin, whence the swift river Nogrod rose. Again, you don't really have to remember all of these places. It just suffice it to say that there's a place, there's a river. It's not really all that important. For there the lands were green and fair at the feet of the mountain of shadow that shielded them from the north. The joy of that feast was long remembered in later days of sorrow, and it was called Mereth. Oh, hang on. Mereth Aderthad. Sorry. Mereth Aderthad, the Feast of Reuniting. Thither came many of the chieftains and peoples of Fingolfin and Finrod, and of the sons of Feanor, Maedhros and Maglor, with warriors of eastern march. And there came also great number of the grey elves, wanderers of the woods of Beleriand and the folks of the havens with Círdan their lord. There came even green elves of Osiriand, the land of 7 rivers, far off under the walls of the Blue Mountains. The green elves are like super in the east. But out of Doriath there came but 2 messengers, Mablung and Daeron, bearing greetings from the king. So Thingol didn't go. Thingol and Melian, again, being the sort of like, get off my lawn kind of people. Mablung and Daeron are going to play a little bit of a bigger role later. I will bring those names up again probably 2 or 3 chapters from now, I want to say. So just make sure you note them. The joy of that feast. Sorry, gotta find my place again. At Mereth Aderthad, many counsels were taken in goodwill, and oaths were sworn of leagues and friendship, and it was told that at this feast the tongues of the grey elves was most spoken even by the Noldor, for they learned swiftly the speech of Beleriand, whereas the Sindar were slow to master the tongue of Valinor. The hearts of the Noldor were high and full of hope, and too many among them it seemed that the words of Feanor had been justified, bidding them seek freedom and fair kingdoms in Middle-earth. You'll remember, Feanor was like, let's go start our own club in Middle-earth. We don't need the Valar. This is great. We're the masters of our own fate. And it seems pretty good, right? We've literally done a 20-year time skip in, like, a paragraph, right? All of the elves are spreading out. They beat Morgoth. He's just, you know, he's there, but we don't have to worry about him. It's fine. We totally beat them. We've got nothing to worry about. Oops. It's not entirely true just yet. Also, I'm going in and out of focus. I'm trying to find the right... Oh, you all right? Oh, okay. Sorry. I had a scared dog there for a second. Gotta be careful. All right. The hearts of the Noldor. Yep, read that. Yeah, that the words of the Feanor were justified, bidding them... Okay, here we go. There followed, after long years of peace, while their swords fenced Beleriand from the ruin of Morgoth, and his power was shut behind his gates. In those days there was joy beneath the new sun and moon, and all the land was glad. But still the shadow brooded in the north. Uh-oh. And when again 30 years had passed, Turgon, son of Fingolfin, left Nevrast, where he dwelt, and sought out Finrod his friend upon the island of Tol Sirion, and they journeyed southward along the river, being weary for a while of the northern mountains. And as they journeyed, night came upon them, beyond the meres of twilight, beside the waters of Sirion, and they slept beyond his banks beneath the summer stars. But Ulmo, coming up the river, laid a deep sleep upon them, and heavy dreams. Quick pause for a second. Ulmo, you'll remember, is one of the Valar from the Undying Lands. He is basically the Poseidon equivalent. But Ulmo, coming up the river, laid a deep sleep upon them and heavy dreams. And the trouble of the dreams remained after they awoke. But neither said aught to the other, for their memory was not clear, and each believed that Ulmo had sent a message to him alone. But unquiet was upon them ever after, and doubt of what should befall. And they wandered often alone in untrodden lands, seeking far and wide for places of hidden strength. For it seemed to each that he was bidden to prepare for a day of evil, and to establish a retreat, lest Morgoth should burst from Angband and overthrow the armies of the north. Foreshadowing, foreshadowing, foreshadowing. Torgon. Just remember Torgon. Now on a time, Finrod and Galadriel, his sister. Galadriel's here. Now on a time, Finrod and Galadriel, his sister, were the guests of Thingol, their kinsman in Doriath. Then Finrod was filled with wonder at the strength and majesty of Menegroth, their treasuries and armories, and its many-pillared halls of stone, and it came into his heart that he would build wide halls, behind ever-guarded gates, in some deep and secret place behind the hills. Therefore he opened his heart to Thingol, telling him of the dreams, and Thingol spoke to him of the deep gorge of the river Nogrod, and the caves under the high Faroth in its steep western shore. And when he departed he gave him guides to lead him to that place, of which few yet knew. Thus Finrod came to the caverns of Nogrod, and began to establish there deep halls and armories after a fashion of the mansions of Menegroth. And the stronghold was called Nargothrond. In that labor Finrod was aided by the dwarves of the Blue Mountains, and they were rewarded well. Try saying that 5 times fast. For Finrod had brought more treasure out of Tirion than any other of the princes of the Noldor, and in that time was made for him the Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves, most renowned of their works in the elder days. It was a carcanet of gold, and set therein with gems uncounted from Valinor, but it had a power within it, so that it rested lightly on the wearer, as a strand of flax, which is like, I think flax is like a hay, or like a very light, thready material. And whatsoever neck it clasped, it always sat with grace and loveliness. Now, I want you all to write this down if you're taking notes. Remember the Nauglamir. It's gonna be important later. I hate the Nauglamir, and I love the Nauglamir, but it's things happen. There in Nargothrond, Finrod made his home with many of his people, and he was named in the tongues of the dwarves Felegund. So Finrod got a name from the dwarves, Felegund. That's going to come up a little bit later. Finrod Felegund kind of becomes his first and second name. Also, Mossy J, thank you for the follow. There in Nargothrond, Finrod made his home with many of his people, and he was named in the tongues of the dwarves Felegund, hewer of caves, and that name he bore thereafter until his end. But Finrod Felegund was not the first to dwell in the caves beside the river Nogrod. Galadriel, his sister, went not with him to Nargothrond, for in Doriath dwelt Celeborn, kinsman of Thingol, and there was great love between them. Therefore she remained in the hidden kingdom, and abode with Melian, and of her learned great lore and wisdom concerning Middle-earth. But Torgon remembered the city set upon a hill, Tirion the Fair, and its towers and trees. Tirion is the place in the Undying Lands where all of the elves and Valar hang out. But Turgon remembered the city set upon a hill, Tirion the Fair, with its towers and trees, and he found not what he sought, but remained at Nevrast, and sat in peace in Vinyamar by the shores of the sea. And in the next year Ulmo himself appeared to him, and bade him go forth alone into the vale of Sirion. And Turgon went forth by the guidance of Ulmo, and discovered the hidden vale of Tumladin in the encircling mountains, in the midst of which there lay a hill of stone. Of this he spoke to none yet, but returned once more to Nevrast, and there began in secret council to devise the plan of a city after the manner of Tirion upon Tuna, for which his heart yearned in exile. Remember, I'll pause there for a second. Feel free to type questions into the chat if you feel so inclined. Everyone on TikTok, if you are still here, thank you so much for joining. We are taking questions over on Twitch about the Silmarillion. Come join us. So, what has basically happened in this chapter is the Noldor have arrived in Middle-earth. They are establishing their realms, and Tolkien is setting up a lot of what is going to be very important later. Turgon is told by Ulmo, the Valar, to come to this place that looks like it has the potential to be a great place to live. Turgon is going to be very important later on. I recommend you remember Turgon. I recommend you remember Finrod Felagund, and you remember Thingol. Those are kind of like the big players in the space right now. Fingolfin, obviously, is another one. So we've got Turgon, who is, Turgon, Fingolfin, oh shoot, I'm forgetting the names too. So, hang on. Let me do this. Thingol is in Doriath. He's the get off my lawn guy. Fingolfin is the king of the Noldor. Finrod Felagund is the other one, and Turgon, who is leading, who is creating the potential city later on. The folks on my TikTok who have seen the video about a place called Gondolin may already know what's going to happen. I won't spoil it for you, obviously, but yeah, that is kind of what is being set up right now. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to list them in the chat below. You're all spamming my wife and dogs emoji because you saw them walk in and out. Thank you. That's why I made them. All right. Here we go. Is that necklace what Galadriel gives to Frodo? No, so Gallifrey and Storm, Galadriel gives something else to Frodo. That's going to come up here in probably several weeks. It is the Light of Earendil. I won't tell you what happens, but you will. I made a video about it if you want to spoil yourself. But take your time, and I think I always recommend people wait for this one. Also, I need to change the height of this image. There we go. Also a little bit too high up. There we go. You can see this art was done, by the way, by Sarah M. Shunky, who is the artist for the Silmarillion Sunday thumbnail and this background, and big shout outs to her. I'll actually post her information in my chat right now. If anyone wants to go check her out, show her some love, please do. Lukia in the chat makes a very good point. Basically, if an item is created and given a name, 90% chance it's important later. Absolutely. Absolutely. If Tolkien gives anything a name that is like super like is brought up a fair number of times again, there's a really good chance that that's going to be a problem later on. Also, as I, drink out of my own mug, I also translated Yeet Isildur into Elvish. I don't know if I mentioned that, but yep. Anyway, more questions if you got them. The more names, the more important. Yeah, Mr. Mime, you're quite accurate. The more names someone has, usually they get they get up on the importance scale. All right. I don't see any other questions, so I'm gonna keep going. Yeah, these parts I think require a little bit less explanation, or you all, it's a little bit easier to grasp from a reader's perspective, right? Because we're getting into more of the plot that is driven by action rather than explanation or exposition. All right, let's keep going. Now Morgoth, believing the report of his spies that the lords of the Noldor were wandering abroad with little thought of war, made trial of the strength and watchfulness of his enemies. Once more, with little warning, his might was stirred, and suddenly there were earthquakes in the north, and fire came from fissures in the earth, and the iron mountains vomited flames, and orcs poured forth across the plains of Gallen. Thence they thrust down the pass of Sirion in the west, and in the east they burst through the land of Maglor in the gap between the hills of Maethros and the outlier of the Blue Mountains. But Fingolfin and Maethros were not sleeping, and while others sought out the scattered bands of orcs that strayed in Beleriand and did great evil, they came upon the main host from either side as it was assaulting Dorthonion. And they defeated the servants of Morgoth and pursued them across Ardgarlan, destroying them utterly, to the least and the last, within sight of Angband's gates. That was the third great battle in the Wars of Beleriand, and it is named Dagor Aglareb, the Glorious Battle. There are 5 battles in this 500-ish years long war with Morgoth. This is the third one. And, oh, Tin Fizzy, thank you for the gift sub. That's very kind. And, yeah, the fourth battle, just keep in mind that there have been 3 battles and the fourth one is going to be a problem. A victory it was, and yet a warning, and the princes took heed of it, and therefore drew closer their leaguer, and strengthened their order and ordered their watch, setting the siege of Angband, which lasted well nigh 400 years of the sun. For a long time after Dagor Aglareb, no servant of Morgoth would venture from his gates, for they feared the lords of the Noldor, and Fingolfin boasted that save by treason among them, Morgoth could never again burst from the leaguer of the Eldar. Look at me. I'm going to read that line again, because it's important, and I want you all know what's going to happen. But I want you to remember it. Fingolfin boasted that save by treason, so unless someone betrayed them, save by treason among themselves, Morgoth could never again burst from the leaguer of the Eldar. Tolkien's not exactly subtle. Yeah. Yet Noldor could not capture Angband, nor could they regain the Silmarils, and war never wholly ceased in that time of the siege. For Morgoth devised new evils, and ever and anon he would make trials of his enemies. Nor could the stronghold of Morgoth be ever encircled, for the Iron Mountains, from whose great curving walled the towers of Thangorodrim, were thrust forward, defended it upon either side, and were impassable to the Noldor, because of their snow and ice. Thus, in his rear and to the north, Morgoth had no foes, and by that way his spies at times went out, and came by devious routes to Beleriand. And desiring above all to sow fear and disunion among the Eldar, he commanded the orcs to take alive any of them that they could, and bring them bound to Angband. And some he so daunted by the terror of his eyes that they needed chains no more, but walked ever in fear of him, doing his will wherever they might be. Thus Morgoth learned much of all that had befallen since the rebellion of Feanor, and he rejoiced, seeing therein the seeds of many dissensions among his foes. Uh-oh. When nearly 100 years had run since the Dagor Aglareb, Morgoth endeavored to take Fingolfin at unawares, for he knew of the vigilance of Maedhros. And he sent forth an army into the white north, and he turned west again, south, and again south, and came down upon the coast of the Firth of Drengist, by the route that Fingolfin followed from the grinding ice. So, literally, Morgoth says, okay, cool, we've got mountains on either side of us, we're safe, and we have, like, the ice beyond us and the water. Let's go on the ice where Fingolfin went and come down and around Middle-earth. And he sent his army into the white north, and they turned west and again south, and came down the coast to the Firth of Drengist, by the route that Fingolfin followed from the grinding ice. Thus they would enter into the realm of Hithlim from the west, but they were espied in time, and Fingon fell upon them among the hills at the head of the firth, and most of the orcs were driven into the sea. This was not reckoned among the great battles, for the orcs were not in great number, and only a part of the people of Hithlim fought there. But thereafter there was peace for many years, and no open assault from Angband, for Morgoth perceived now that the orcs unaided were no match for the Noldor, and he sought in his heart for new counsel. If the orcs aren't strong enough, I wonder what will be. Again, Tolkien, subtlety, not a strong suit. Again, after 100 years, Glaurung, the first of the Uruk-loki, the fire drakes of the north, issued from Angband's gates by night. He was yet young and scarce half grown, for long and slow is the life of the dragons, but the elves fled before him to Eredwethrin and Dorthonion in dismay. And he defiled the fields of Ardgalan, and Fingon, prince of Hithlim, rode against him with archers on horseback, and hemmed him round with a ring of swift riders, and Glaurung could not endure their darts, being not yet come to his full armory. And he fled back to Angband, and came not forth again for many years. Fingon won great praise, and the Noldor rejoiced. For few foresaw the full meaning and threat of this new thing. But Morgoth was ill-pleased that Glaurung had disclosed himself over soon. Too soon, basically. And after his defeat there was the long peace of well-nigh 200 years. In all that time there were but affrays on the march, and all Beleriand prospered and grew rich behind the guard of their armies. Behind the guard of their armies in the north, the Noldor built their dwellings and their towers, and many fair things they made in those days, and poems and histories and the books of lore. In many parts of the land the Noldor and the Sindar became welded into one people, and spoke the same tongue. That tongue is Sindarin, which is what is found in the movies from The Lord of the Rings. In many parts of the land the Noldor and the Sindar became welded into one people, and spoke the same tongue, though this difference remained between them, that the Noldor had the greater power of mind and body, and were the mightier warriors and sages, and they built with stone, and loved the hill slopes and open lands. But the Sindar had the fairer voices, and were more skilled in music, save only Maglor, son of Feanor. Maglor's going to come up again. He's one of the sons of Feanor. Keep him in mind. And they loved the woods and the riverside, and some of the grey elves still wandered far and wide, without settled abode, and they sang as they went. That is the end of chapter 14. I will pause there to take any questions. We've been going for about a half hour. The next chapter is chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. This is kind of, I may stop in the middle of this one as well. I apologize. I'm not a huge fan of doing that, but we've only been reading about a half hour. Well, actually about 40 minutes. But this chapter, chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms, is a little bit more of the exposition. You can kind of skip it if you feel so inclined. If you're in a rush and you just want the plot, it's important, I won't lie, but it's not like not a lot of the plot happens in this one. From my memory, there's a few things that I'll probably mention in a recap if it's very important, but Tolkien has really, in this chapter of The Coming of the Noldor, set the scene where the elves of Middle-earth, Thingol and Melian and everyone in Doriath, they've been there. The Noldor come over. They're all fighting against Morgoth. They win this great battle. There's 200 years of peace. Everything's going really well. So the scene is set for the next 300 years. Well, it's close. I believe it's something like 474 years, if I remember correctly. I might be wrong about that. I'll double check after the stream. But the war between the Noldor and the forces of Morgoth are gonna sort of take a sideline for a time, where you kind of understand that it's kind of this ongoing war, right? It's an ongoing siege. There's constant battles or skirmishes or sorties throughout the land, and that's just kind of accepted there. So a couple of the stories that are going to come up a little bit later on, like of the coming of men into the west, of the ruin of Beleriand, of Beren and Luthien. So all of these are kind of throughout all of these, it's kind of accepted that, like, there is war, it is happening, but it's a constant thing. I don't recommend you skip it, obviously, but if you are kind of bored by some of the exposition, you could probably do without this part. I'm just, I don't recommend it, but again, it is something we can do. Okay, I'm gonna take some questions from chat. Here we go. Kayla Bear makes an excellent point in chat. Tolkien just kind of slaps you in the face with it when I'm saying that he doesn't do subtlety very well. Absolutely right. Glaurung did try his best. Yeah, Darth, you are absolutely right. Pudding asked if I could read all of it again. He wasn't listening. YouTube.com/DonMarshall72, I think. I don't know how YouTube does links anymore. Pest Stopper. Oh, Pest Stopper, great question. Should you read the Silmarillion before the trilogy if you haven't read anything yet? No. I actually have a recommended reading order on my TikTok. It is a video that I think I usually go in the order of various things that are published. That's how I read most other books, but I recommend you read The Hobbit, then you read the original trilogy, then you read the Silmarillion. So those 5 books are kind of your core Tolkien books. Beyond that, there are a lot of other books by Tolkien that you could read that are based on his notes. I recommend a certain order, which is, 3 of the... I actually have them here. So some of the... it's kind of a spoiler, but it's okay. Some of the books that are like extended editions of the Silmarillion. So there's a chapter in the Silmarillion called The Tale of Beren and Luthien. Well, there's a book called Beren and Luthien. It's about 297 pages long, and it is several versions of Beren and Luthien, older drafts that Tolkien wrote. And what you will find is that beyond those 5 core books, there are a lot of other Tolkien books, but they are mostly made up of older notes, lots of drafts compiled together, things that are not necessarily the same sort of plot-driven, character-driven things beyond notes and short stories. Like, there's the Book of Lost Tales, parts 1 and 2. There's the Book of Unfinished Tales and the Tales of Numenor. Short little vignette stories that sort of come into their own in the Silmarillion as a published version. Christopher Tolkien, though, Tolkien's son, that's my dog, wanted to sort of expand upon those. Sorry, I went off on a little bit of a tangent, but it's a great question. All right, more questions in the chat, if we've got any. Were there any evil elves? So, Brad, great question. If you're asking whether or not elves, side with Morgoth, for the most part, no. There are examples, though, of elves becoming filled with anger, and they make rash decisions, or they make really poor decisions that help Morgoth. But if I remember correctly, there are no elves that actually side with Morgoth himself. But in the mistakes that they make, there are things that they do that help Morgoth unintentionally. There is also the thought that elves that have been corrupted by Morgoth are the beginnings of the orcs. There are a couple of origin stories that Tolkien wrote for the orcs, but the widely accepted one is that they are corrupted elves, which is what it says in the Silmarillion, and I tend to lean that way. Emily Elizabeth Wren asks, does Cuiviénen still exist at this point? I think it must, but I think it looks different. You know what? Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. Hang on. I will check the mountains. It might be beyond the mountains. Because Cuiviénen is where the elves first came into existence, right? They first came to consciousness there. Correct me if I'm wrong there. There's so many names, sometimes even I get them mixed up. I'm not sure if Cuiviénen still exists. I want to say yes, but I could be wrong on that. Feel free to correct me in chat if anyone does know the answer to that. All right. After we read this, we should speed read on the stream and see how fast I can get through. See how fast I can get through the Silmarillion. I could probably speed read through this in, let's see, 100 pages in 10 parts. Call it, with no explanation, 13, 14 hours maybe? Children of Horin is great too. Oh, yes. Another one of these sort of extended edition books is Children of Horin. Oh, wait, I actually have it with me. This is Children of Horin. I have it in paperback, but they did release one of those really nice hardback cover books. I've been meaning to get that one for ages and just have not yet. All right. Do I recommend the Atlas of Tolkien's Middle-earth? You know what, Lena? I actually haven't had the chance to look at that one yet, so I can't recommend it, simply because I haven't read it. I do know people that have, though. They very much like it, so I can't recommend it personally, but those people that I trust about Tolkien's opinions say that they very much like it. Also, going to do a quick shout-out. Hello to everyone that is here on Twitch. Hello to everyone that's here on TikTok. We are live on Twitch. Feel free to check it out. The link is in my bio. All right. I think I am going to keep going for just a little bit into Chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. Not a terribly interesting chapter, but it does kind of give you an idea of what's going on. I recommend, if you are listening to this some way and you bring up a map that is existing in one of these books, I will recommend you have one of those out with you, just to kind of get a sense of where people are and what they're doing. All right. Chapter 14 of Beleriand and its realms. This is the fashion of the lands into which the Noldor came, in the north of the western regions of Middle-earth in the ancient days, and here also is told of the manner of which the chieftains of the Eldar held their lands and the leaguer upon Morgoth after the Dagor Aglareb, the third battle in the Wars of Beleriand. So Tolkien starts off this chapter by saying, here's where we stand right now. Here are all of the major players. Here's where we stand. There is Morgoth. There are these elves. This is kind of a name dump. So if it seems like everything is overly complicated, feel free to go back and reread this part. Actually, you know what? Do I want to... I might pause here. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking we might want to stop, because this is a good 7 pages and we've been here an hour. Chat, let me know. Anybody have any recommendations? Do you want me to keep going? Are you okay if I pause halfway through? Because this is kind of one of those chapters that I think might be better off. I made this decision yesterday and I changed my mind and now I'm going back on it. I'm very fickle that way. Very fickle that way. Yeah, let's keep going. Let's keep going. We'll do a little bit. I won't go terribly far into this one, though. In the north of the world, Melkor had, in the ages past, reared Ered Egrin, the Iron Mountains, as a fence to his citadel of Utumno. Utumno is basically his palace-ish. And they stood upon the borders of the regions of everlasting cold, in a great curve from east to west, beyond the walls of Ered Engrin in the west, where they bent back northwards. That was a confusing sentence, Tolkien. Where they bent back northwards, Melkor built another fortress as a defense against assault that might come from Valinor. And when he came back to Middle-earth, as has been told, he took up his abode in the endless dungeons of Angband and the Hells of Iron. That's what Angband means, by the way, the Hells of Iron. For in the wars of power, the Valar, in their haste to overthrow him in his great stronghold of Utumno, did not wholly destroy Angband, nor search out all its deep places. Beneath Ered Engrin, he made a great tunnel, which both issued south of the mountains, and there he made a mighty gate. And above this gate, and behind it even, to the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim, that were made of the ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces. So in case anyone is curious, he is literally taking the scrap metal. Morgoth is taking the scrap metal and creating towers out of it. Giant, like, Mordor-ish looking towers. To give you an idea of what Angband looks like there. Beneath Ered, yep, okay, but above the gate and behind it, even the mountains, he piled the thunderous towers of Thangorodrim that were made from the ash and slag of his subterranean furnaces, and the vast refuse of his tunneling. They were black and desolate and exceedingly lofty, and smoke issued from their tops, dark and foul upon the northern sky. Before the gate of Angband, filth and desolation spread southward for many miles over the wide plains of Ard Galan. But after the coming of the sun, rich grass arose there, and while Angband was besieged and its gates shut, there were green things there, even among the pits and broken rocks before the doors of hell. You know what? I am going to stop here. That's a great description of Angband. Excuse me. But I don't want to get too into the regions and stuff. I am more than happy to hang out for a little while longer here on Twitch chat. Twitch folks, if you are still around, thank you so much. TikTok folks, if you want to come chat on Twitch, we'll be doing both. Those watching on YouTube, we will pick this up again in part 11 next week. So thank you all so much for being here. All of my information and things are below if you are interested in any of the Yeet Isildur in English or Elvish. I've got a couple of other things there as well. If you feel so inclined, check out the Discord as well as the Twitch channel and the TikTok account. But I imagine most of you come from there. So thank you again so much, and I will see you all. Oh wait, honey, did I miss anything that YouTube needs to know about? Discord, TikTok, merch.
On Wednesday? Oh, no better, do better.
Yes, if anyone is interested in coming New Beta, Do Beta, the other obscure Lord of the Rings TikTok guy, is going to be coming on the channel. That starts at 7 p.m. Eastern. Good. I think that's it. Oh, and Friday is going to be our WandaVision finale spoilers discussion. So we're doing something non-Lord of the Rings related because it's fun. Anyway, thank you all so much for being here, and I will see you all next time.